For months, Daniel kept eating dinner standing at the sink. Not because he was busy, because sitting down made the apartment feel too quiet. He would leave one lamp off, then another. Let the room stay dim. Tell himself he was only tired. Tell himself this was what adults did when life got heavy. They kept working, kept answering people, kept their voice even. What unsettled him was not that he still hurt. It was that more and more often, he could not feel himself reaching for anything at all. People think life returns with noise, with tears, with a big answer. With a morning so different, it proves the dark season is over. But sometimes what comes back first is smaller than that. Sometimes it is only this: a man who has been numb for a long time, realizing he would like to see tomorrow morning. Daniel was 34 and had built a life around being dependable. He worked in operations for a shipping company, where something was always late, missing, broken, or urgent. He was good at it because he stayed calm when other people sped up. That had always looked like strength. Months earlier, the relationship he thought would become home ended in the least dramatic way possible. Not one explosion, not one slammed door. Just tired conversations, longer silences, postponed plans, hurt that never got named cleanly enough, and one final phone call after which both of them sounded like people setting something heavy down. After that, Daniel kept the structure of his life, but not much of its warmth. He still ironed shirts on Sunday night, still remembered birthdays, still answered emails before 8. What he wanted was simple and strangely far away now, to feel present inside his own life again. What he feared was harder to say, that this flattened version of him might be the version that stayed. So he made one quiet bargain with himself. Want less, feel less, need less. It sounded like maturity. It was really survival. The bargain followed him home. In the mornings, he boiled water for coffee and forgot it on the counter until it went cold. Twice in the same week, he heated soup, took a few spoonfuls, then left the bowl in the sink and ate crackers from the sleeve, because finishing one small meal felt like too much commitment to the evening. On Thursdays, his sister usually called while he was driving home. Lately, he had started letting the phone ring. Then he would sit in the parked car outside his building, with both hands on the steering wheel, staring through the windshield until the dashboard went black. At church, he stood when everyone stood and sat when everyone sat. During a song he used to love, he watched a strip of colored light slide across the floor instead of singing a word. None of this looked dramatic from the outside. That was part of the problem. His life was not falling apart loudly enough for anyone to interrupt it. The thing that disturbed the pattern was almost too small to count. One Tuesday morning, just after 6, his phone buzzed with a voice note from his niece. She had borrowed her mother's phone. Her voice was thick with sleep. "Uncle Daniel, are the ducks still at the lake?" He listened once, then again. The kettle clicked off behind him, but he did not move. He had not been to the lake in months. He used to walk there before work when his mind got loud, back when quiet felt like prayer instead of absence. He set the phone down, pulled on yesterday's sweatshirt, and left the mug in the sink. He did not make a plan. He only walked out before the day could close over him again. The first morning by the lake gave him nothing he could turn into a testimony. The bench was damp. The air bit through his sleeves. Somewhere behind him, a runner's shoes struck the path in a steady rhythm. The water barely moved. Daniel stood there with his hands in his pockets and felt almost no change at all. No sudden peace, no deep breath that fixed something. no sign that God was doing anything obvious with his pain. On the walk home, he felt embarrassed by how badly he had wanted the morning to mean more. So he went back to older methods, the ones that made him feel useful for a few hours. He stayed later at work, cleaned out his inbox, made a note in his phone called "Get Back on Track," tried to turn recovery into a system. Wake up earlier, walk 3 times a week, read something hopeful. Stop being like this. 3 days later, the list was still there, but he was back in the kitchen eating crackers in the dark. The old way had not healed him. It had only made numbness look organized. He went back to the lake anyway. Not every day, not because he felt strong, mostly because he had run out of ways to avoid himself. On the 4th morning, he sat on the bench with a paper cup warming both hands and watched the first line of sun appear on the water. It did not flood the whole lake at once. First, there was only a thin strip of gold near the far edge. Then it widened. Then the surface began taking light in places that, a minute earlier, still looked gray. He kept watching. That was all. No lesson arriving in words, no voice in his head, just water and morning and light returning without asking permission from the dark that had been there first. Something in him went still, not the dead stillness he had been living in, a different stillness, one that could listen. The breaking point came 3 mornings later, and it did not look like a breaking point. Daniel was watching that same line of light spread across the lake when one thought crossed his mind. I should come earlier tomorrow. His grip tightened around the cup. He looked up from the water as if someone had spoken. Because people who are truly done do not make gentle plans for tomorrow. And sitting there, with the day opening in front of him, one narrow line at a time, Daniel saw what had been happening to him more clearly than he had let himself see before. He was not only hurting because someone left. He was hurting because, after the loss, he had started leaving first. Leaving calls unanswered, leaving songs unsung, leaving prayer unfinished, leaving the table before dinner was over, leaving tomorrow untouched so it could not disappoint him. The wound was real. But after the wound, he had begun helping the numbness do its work. That was the truth that hurt. Not that life had left him completely, that he had started calling emptiness safety. Nothing dramatic changed after that. For a while, the only change was that he noticed his disappearing sooner. He noticed when he was about to eat, standing at the sink again, and, some nights, carried the bowl to the table instead. Other nights, he still stood there anyway. He noticed when his sister called and called back the same evening once, then let the next call ring out and hated how familiar that felt. He began opening the curtains before checking his phone. Not because it made him inspired, because the room looked less sealed when light got in first. He went to the lake 2 mornings one week, then not at all the week after. When the old heaviness settled over him again, he did not turn it into a verdict this time. He just went back on Friday. Later, he sent his niece a photo of 2 ducks near the edge of the water and wrote, "They're still here." Some mornings he read a few lines of scripture by the window. He did not force meaning out of them. He just stayed long enough not to rush past his own soul. Small things, repeated when he could, real because they were small. That is how life returned to him, not with noise, not all at once, not in a way that erased the long silence before it. It came back the way light returned to the lake, first a thin line, then a little more, then enough to show that gray had not been the whole story. A phone call returned, A curtain opened. A meal eaten sitting down. A man who thought numbness was the safest place, discovering that some part of him still leaned toward mourning. Maybe grace often looks like that. Not a loud rescue, not a perfect ending. Just a faithful quiet that stays long enough for the heart to soften without being forced. So, if you are in a season where healing does not look dramatic, do not despise what is small. Sometimes, after the silence, the holiest thing that happens is this: you want tomorrow again. If this met you where you are, you can leave a simple "still here" in the comments.